Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, whatever time zone you're in, whatever time you're watching this. Thank you for watching. Not legal advice with a K. Like, subscribe, share, comment, and thank you for watching. Send me any questions you have, and I'll try to answer them. Tonight's joke, why, or I put that in quotation marks when I say joke. So tonight's whatever you want to call it. Why did the crab not share? Because he was shellfish. Hope you enjoyed that. That one was not from Little Bruce T. But anyway, thank you. And if you have good jokes, send them. Feel free. If I think they're bad enough, I'll use them. So, kind of wanted to talk about three things that struck me today, not literally, but figuratively. One is Gary Gensler. Two is the Nord Stream pipeline, the gas pipeline uh, that was the Russian gas pipeline to Europe. And three is Jeffrey Epstein and JPMorgan Chase Bank. So, three interesting topics. I wanted to go through each of them. I'll go with them through them quickly. So, there's a movement to get rid of Gensler. There's a bill introduced in Congress by Representative Davidson to remove power away from Gensler and I think try to terminate him. And the way it's done is I think it's going to take away power from the commissioner or the head, being Gensler, and give it to six other people who will have decision making authority. But those six will be divided equally, theoretically, between conservatives and not conservatives. So perhaps you might have a stalemate with those six people, and that might lock up the decision making of the board. I have some concern about the sponsor of the bill because he did not vote for or against naked short selling or short sellers, that act that was up for vote. So I don't know if his interests are protecting investors. It sounds like more that he's trying to prevent further or harsher regulation on institutions. That's the way I read it. But we'll have to see what plays out. There was a recent indictment, I think yesterday or today, by the SEC against a naked short seller, but they're a pretty small player, and I think it may have been an attempt by the SEC to mollify investors who've been harmed, like with MMTLP and other securities. So we need real enforcement protecting retail investors, not like what's occurred recently, FINRA going to Congress and basically when Congress was asking FINRA for a share count of MMTLP or the blue sheets, uh, FINRA basically told Congress to F themselves and didn't provide the information. If Gensler continues to support or tolerate that type of conduct and is really not interested in protecting investors, then he shouldn't be there. But we don't need a replacement or a lesser system that protects investors to a lesser degree. So I'm somewhat skeptical about the bill and the intention of the bill, but I agree that Gensler has to go if he doesn't provide support. So when you discuss this bill or review it, think about all those factors. And again, think about if, notwithstanding we don't like Gensler, if the new procedures and regulations will actually assist retail investors. So that's one. Second part was about the Nord Stream pipeline. So that's a pipeline that serviced Europe, actually through the Baltic Sea from Russia, supplied gas. And there was an explosion September 26th, I believe, that damaged multiple pipelines. And it basically put out the pipeline out of business, so it couldn't deliver gas to countries in Europe and especially Germany. I think Germany was most impacted because they had gone away from nuclear energy in Germany and they were strapped, didn't have access, so they relied upon the pipeline. Some countries in the EU or in Europe, because not all of them are in the EU, opposed the pipeline because they thought it would make European countries too dependent on the pipeline. One of those countries that opposed the pipeline apparently was Poland. How do you like that? So apparently, since the explosion and the damaging of the pipeline and put it out of business, and it did cause a energy issue in Europe, and probably till this day, and has shifted Europe's dependence to more of, I think, natural gas. But there's been a lot of speculation about who did it, whatever. So I read an article recently and about things I didn't know, that there's an ongoing investigation about many European countries, Germany leading the way, and they're trying to find out what the cause of the pipeline explosion. And again, there's been a lot of speculation about the cause, the US or Ukraine or someone else or Russians. I think there was all those have been accused, but no clear definitive answer. And in this article, it said that Germany had made a lot of headway in the investigation and believes that a 50-foot pleasure yacht called the Andromeda was used to lay the explosives using a colorless explosive called oxygen. And what's interesting about the story is, and we'll have to see how this plays out, but I thought the story was interesting. And what's interesting about the story is that the boat, the Andromeda, which also has an interesting name, was rented in Germany apparently from a shell company that had no income. It did apparently Andromeda with members of a team did the deed by blowing up one of the lines and then sailed from there to Poland, uh, where it either met people, refueled, got additional goods, explosives, etc., got support, but then went from Poland back and then did another line. And the allegations are that material support came from individuals in Poland or from the government. And Poland has an approximate 320-mile border with Ukraine. So you can draw any conclusions you want as to that. So, but Germany and Poland are already at odds. So if the above is true, that the pipeline that put a lot of distress in Germany was blown up with the assistance of Poland or Poles or through Poland, it will certainly add further distress in Europe. And it'll be interesting to see what happens to the relationship between Germany and Poland, and also what happens when it's discovered that a country in the EU was directly responsible, if that's how it turns out. So I thought that was an interesting article also, and I'll be following that, see how it turns out when the investigation is complete. The third and final story that I found really troubling, and I really would like to know all the investigative details and hope that it's not all confidential, but I'm afraid it will be. But I'm hoping that some investigative journalists or others will leak the information. So the story is apparently, and it was today or yesterday, a class action in New York was certified, and it was Jane. I think the title of the case was Jane Doe Number One versus JPMorgan Chase, and it was certified in court. And thereafter, apparently, JPMorgan Chase Bank, etc., agreed to pay $290 million to settle the class action lawsuit. And the number of plaintiffs is pretty small. I think the maximum amount, I think reference was 100. So that's a lot of money, or at least it could be a lot of money. And per the article that I read, it said that J.P. Morgan will pay the sum because they were doing business with Jeffrey Epstein. They had, or Epstein, however you pronounce his name. They were obtaining his accounts, and otherwise. I don't know if they were giving him financing, but probably that also. But I don't know that for a fact. And basically, they were doing it at a time they either they knew, or should have known that those accounts supported his sex trafficking ring. And I found that really distressing, obviously. The Virgin Islands has an October 23rd trial scheduled against JP Morgan with regard to the same matter. And I think Epstein owned a island in that area, and that's why there's jurisdiction in the Virgin Islands. And they're suing, apparently, on behalf of the victims or alleged victims against JP Morgan Chase in the Virgin Islands. I hope all the facts come out and we understand what went on there. I believe Deutsche Bank already settled a lawsuit like this, but for significantly less money. And I was really distressed that the banking industry is doing this, if that's true. So I'm going to keep an eye on this one also, and I'll keep you up to date. Be well, take care, have a good one.